right, Michael, George, we went over the rules in the dressing room. Obey my commands at all times. Give me a good, clean fight, and bear one thing in mind. I'm the boss man in here. Take hands, good luck.
Jim, a couple of weeks ago during those floods in Texas, George rescued his elderly parents and took his family to a shelter for the night. Is he on high ground or deep water tonight?
And what about Moorer, who on the advice of trainer Teddy Atlas did not look Foreman in the eye during referee's instructions, instead kept his eyes firmly fixed on George's chest.
Maybe he thinks that's a target. That's one thing you can't miss.
There are a lot of targets where George is standing. Expect Moorer to start off working behind the right jab that served him so well in the battle with Holyfield.
Jim, both fighters' best punch is their jab. Foreman's left jab and Moorer's right jab are their most effective punches, so it should be easy to see who's going to control who with the left jab.
There was a time, Gil, when George's telephone pole left jab was regarded as one of the most effective ever in the sport. Still?
Well, he's a big man if he can put that power behind that left jab. But again, it's not as quick as Moore's, and Moorer can hook off that jab, and George can't.
Both men have landed early, beginning tastes of the opponent's power. And if you think you've seen Foreman's shorts before, they are the same trunks that he wore in the ring against Muhammad Ali October 30, 1974 in Kinshasa, Zaire.
And there's that hook off the jab by Moorer, and it landed solidly. And the way I always have my guys fight when they're fighting a southpaw is move to the right, and that's what George is doing. Right now, he's dictating the movement in the ring.
So Moorer following Foreman as Foreman moves the left foot away from Moorer's right jab and tries to stay away from Moorer's left hand. Moorer not working with the left much so far, jabbing and hooking with the right. Foreman throwing mostly left jabs.
And the way Moorer is moving now, he could be moving right into that clubbing right hand of George Foreman.
Moorer vowed to us that he would not stand still and allow Foreman to get in more than one shot at a time.
George's left eye is starting to swell already.
That eye swelled up so badly in the fight against Alex Stewart. And some of us think, Gil, that that eye has never really fully recovered from the beating Stewart gave him. George got
nice right hand by George Foreman.
Yep,
right down the pipe.
Through the guard. Moorer trying to get to the body with the left. George is a forest of defense up there. Right hand underneath for Foreman. Moorer has to reach up to stick the jab. Tough, Gil?
Well, Moorer has never done very, very well as far as knocking guys out when they're real big men. Like Mike the Giant White went 10 with him. Bone Crusher Smith went 10. So big men apparently do bother Michael Moorer a little bit. Nice right hand counter by George Foreman. His
heavy contact for Foreman down the stretch of the first round. Moorer landed a stinging jab as it came to a close. Angelo Dundee is identified as the cut man in Foreman's corner. You can see that they've greased up the left side of his face where the mouse begins to appear under his left eye.
Well, he couldn't have a better cut man than Angelo Dundee.
But on the other hand, George refuses to sit down between rounds, Gil, and stands up. Does that make it harder for the cut man to do his work?
Absolutely. I spoke to George about that when I interviewed him. Good left hand by Moorer. And he said he hadn't made up his mind yet, but it looks like a compromise. But I've never seen it before. He has a very high stool in his corner. So maybe he's going to compromise that way. But so far, he stood up between rounds, and poor Angelo has to reach all the way up to try to take care of him.
Something of a bar stool for the teetotaling preacher.
And again, Moorer is moving. I don't like the way Moorer is moving to his left.
Making it possible for Foreman to land. Moore is still standing well within contact range for Foreman. I don't think we've seen him yet follow Atlas's instructions to move away and put more distance between himself and George.
Well, if he moved to his right, he'd take himself completely out of George's punching range. And George's punches are not the fastest in the world. I think he'd be able to really do a job with the jab and the right hook if he moved to his right, but he's not doing that.
They threw an equal number of punches in round number 1, but according to punch-stat numbers, Moore landed at twice as high a rate. Foreman's able to stick the jab effectively. He hasn't landed one of those right hands from distance yet. Got one underneath in round 1. Sharp right by Moore, who seems to be gaining confidence. Many times in our coverage of southpaw fighters, George has harped on the strategy of throwing the right-hand lead over the top against the southpaw. That time he got a chance to do it inside from short range.
Well, if he tries to do that from the outside, he's going to get nailed coming in.
So he's got to get close to throw that right-hand lead. Moore stepping inside again. Now he moves back away. Foreman goes right hand to the body. Moore concentrating on the jab in this round.
Jab and hook. Good straight right hand by Big George Foreman.
Back Moore up. Good right hand by Moore. Solid right hand by Foreman. That time again from close range, he was able to throw the right hand lead.
I thought that was a pretty good round.
Get that jab.
Eddie Atlas wanted Michael Moore to work at a rapid pace tonight. In the first 2 rounds, he and Foreman have thrown equal numbers of punches.
I had mentioned that both fighters' best punch has been their jab, and so far Moore has scored a lot more with his jab and right hook, than George has.
No work on the left eye between rounds in Foreman's corner. You notice Dundee calls him son. Same thing he used to call Sugar Ray Leonard.
Well, again, Teddy Atlas between rounds told Moore to move to his right, but he had better get Moore's attention because he's moving exactly the opposite way.
Moving to his left and therefore toward Foreman's right hand.
That's correct.
Atlas working as though his respect for Foreman decreases from round to round. I have a sense here, Gil, that Moore feels as though he has felt Foreman's power and it's not going to hurt him. That could be a big mistake.
Well, again, we have mentioned that George really doesn't have that big snap. His hands aren't as fast as they used to be, but the accumulation of punches by this big, heavy guy can really start putting some pressure on you. And as Larry mentioned, which is true, he's really trying to put his will on Michael Moore.
George landed at 1-2, and then Moore snaps his head back with 2 consecutive jabs. Imposing his will how, Gil?
By just keeping that pressure on, not getting rattled, got nailed in, couple of good solid punches.
You saw that right hook that Moore can bring behind the jab. He's so efficient with the right hand.
And that's the one thing that George can't do. He cannot hook off his jab. But again, he's throwing those clubbing punches now, and they can accumulate. And Atlas is allowing him to get off. Atlas, excuse me, Michael Moore.
I did the same thing.
Teddy's not doing the fighting.
We've begun to think of them as being so intertwined that they're almost the same person in there. Moore misses with the right but lands the left. Much quicker getting his punches away than George. That's no big surprise.
You can see Foreman loading up with that right hand. I'm surprised that Moore couldn't see it.
I'm not sure he's worried about it, Gil. He's putting himself in positions where he'll take a lot of contact.
but he's not countering when George misses.
Solid left hand over the top by Moore. Backing Foreman up again. The heavy blows in that round were landed by the champion.
Knocked down by virtually everyone.
Well, again, he's a big, strong man, but the speed, he doesn't have the hand speed or the snap in those punches. They have to accumulate.
And one of the articles of faith in the sport is that the punch that really hurts you is the one you don't see coming. There aren't going to be many of George's punches that Moore won't see coming.
It surprised me the last round. George was really telegraphing his punches, and he was still able to get him off on Michael Moore.
Is Moore one of those fighters, Gil, who has a tendency to fight at his opponent's pace?
Well, that's what Teddy Atlas is trying to wake him up to not to do. He says, don't let him BS you. He says, he's trying to slow the pace down. You keep a fast pace the way Moore did at the very end of the last round.
Let him out clean. Let him out clean.
Moore again landing the snapping jab here early in round 4. There's Foreman with the right hand lead, made possible by Moore standing in close to him.
They haven't been 5 feet from the ropes in this fight. You know, this ring could have been 10 feet square.
You think a big ring would help Michael Moore, but the way these guys fight, they both fight flat-footed. Nobody's doing too much side-to-side movement, the bobbing and weaving. They're both stand-up fighters, and again, trying to move. A nice combination by George, and an answer back from Michael Moore.
Yeah, they're fighting at a pace and style which, in theory, ought to benefit George Foreman, but Moore continues to do pretty well. And that jab is really snapping George's head back now.
And again, you know, with George, a 45-year-old skin, he should start to mark up from the result of those punches.
Crowd goes nuts as George lands a pawing right hand. They're hoping.
Amazing, Gil. I watched George Foreman for 25 years, I guess. I don't know if I can count 10 times that he's taken steps backward. This keeps coming and coming. That can wear a fighter down.
That's what we had mentioned. The fact that he puts that mental pressure on you by keep coming and clubbing at you. Clubbing the side, clubbing you on the head.
He's going to get his chances because the champion, Michael Moore, seems increasingly willing to step up into George's range, stand inside Foreman's power, and try to pound away with his right hand. There's a straight right again. Left hook by Foreman landed on the side of Moore's head. Moore comes in and lands a left of his own. Just as the right hand lead ought to work in theory for Foreman, you should say the same thing about the left hand lead for Moore. But he works so much behind the right hand and so well.
But I have Moore ahead 2 rounds, 1-1, 1 even.
My scorecard is very close to yours, Larry. I gave Moore 3 rounds and 1 to George, but the 1 round I called very, very close. That was the second round.
In round 4,
the fight I had even. The round I had even.
In round 4, Moore greatly stepped up his activity level. He threw 65 punches in that round. That's a lot closer to the number that Teddy Atlas would like to see, as he hopes that his fighter will wear down the 45-year-old challenger.
Maybe the other way around, the way George is moving those big ponderous arms now.
George with a strong start in round 5. Moore is still standing right in front of him.
And again, you see George clubbing away with those big ponderous arms, and they will get to you after a while.
Yeah, if Moore is going to stand there, he'd do well to throw punches all the time.
And Moore now is fighting with his mouth open. Not really gasping for breath yet, but he looks like he's starting to feel the effects of the pressure.
He says that he trained well, although some look at the weight, 222, 8 pounds more than what he brought into the ring against Holyfield, and say, well, maybe he's not in the same shape.
There was a case where George set him up with that right hand, but just couldn't pull the trigger. That's those slowed reflexes. He didn't have the reflexes against Tommy Morrison, and as you get older, they don't figure to get any better.
There are the right hands. Moore landing 2 in rapid-fire succession. Left hand over the top lands for Moore. Foreman takes another step backward.
I'm surprised that Moore is not trying to throw more body punches. He's just out there fencing with George.
I think he thinks he's going to knock him out. I thought that he would fight cautiously and work for a decision. But he now looks to me as though he thinks he's going to be able to knock Foreman out. And he thinks he'll do it by standing in front of him and trading shots.
Well, hitting that big man can get him very, very tired. Trying to move a big, big body.
He's making a lot of contact, though, Gil.
Now he finally throws a couple of punches to the body.
He should keep doing that. Another one to the body.
If George was sitting here, he would say those punches are going to have an effect later in the fight.
That's exactly what George would say. Money in the bank.
And George has been landing some pretty good punches in the last 20 seconds. There's that straight right hand again from George. He's starting to get the Moore's respect.
No chanting so far. Crowd seems a little uncertain as to how to try to lift Foreman.
There's a good snapping jab from George.
And there are two right hands from Moore. Again, Moore goes back to the body, then comes back up to the head. I think if he keeps going to the body, Gil, he's going to pile the points up.
Those kinds of hook jabs, whatever you call them, quite as stiffly as that, Gil.
Well, you know, Moore is he's a strange duck. He's a guy that's a natural right-hander whose boxes southpaw.
Brushes his teeth with his right hand, shoots full with his left hand, rights with his right hand. He's really a mixed bag. You could call him ambidextrous. It serves him to great advantage in the ring, where his right hand is the stronger hand and the lead hand.
And George is landing some of those left jabs. Again, Moore is trying to fence with a bigger man, where he should be using a little bit of movement and setting up George for those counters. You can just see George flat-footed, not moving. Good right uppercut from George Foreman.
Yeah, first time we've seen the uppercut to great effect, and that's a punch that George thinks he can hurt Moore with, particularly from this range.
Snappy punches from George Foreman. Those punches had a little snap on them. Good right hand by George Foreman.
Showing some quickness in there.
That's exactly what Michael Moore should be doing. Throwing that right hook underneath. Then he can set up that straight left hand.
Moore with an uppercut of his own, followed by a hook. Uppercut, hook, both with the right hand. There's Foreman coming up underneath. They've gotten so close to each other, I'm suspecting we're going to see more and more uppercuts as the rounds progress. Foreman to land, and the big man is getting off to good effect in round 6.
Also getting hit with some pretty solid counters from Michael Moore.
But what the crowd is responding to is that George's blows appear to be the heavier shots now. The price George can pay when he opens up. Solid right hand by Moore. Foreman's left eye beginning to close.
The battle of the jabs is being won by Michael Moore.
He finally threw a left cross there and almost landed it.
But that turkey is landing a few drumsticks right now.
And here's the definition of a slugfest by punch stat numbers in round 6. Moore landed 73% of his punches. Foreman landed 63% of his punches in return.
And again, Moore winning the battle of the jabs.
Here comes the chance. So when they trade jabs, you see that as an advantage for Moore.
Absolutely. But the thing that Moore has not been able to do is set George up for that straight left hand. And again, I think he could do it if he would throw that right hand underneath. Foreman has been actually taking more chances with his right hand than Michael Moore has with his straight left.
Well, remember that Moore was essentially cautious against Holyfield, particularly after the early knockdown. If it made sense to be cautious against Holyfield, it makes even more sense to be cautious against Foreman.
There was another example where George Foreman just couldn't pull a trigger. Michael Moore was wide open for a right hand, but George couldn't let the punch go.
Foreman landed underneath to the body. Moore still jabbing and hooking with that right hand.
George Foreman is slow to a walk now. He's just walking around the ring, and again, Moore walking right with him instead of using a little movement to set George up. Nice straight right hand down the pipe by George. That's what Michael Moore has to do. When Moore misses with that ponderous right hand, he's going to have to counter. So far, he's not been successful with counter punches at all.
See Moore in close is going to himself, pop, pop, pop. And George is old enough to be his pop.
I was just going to say, do you think he's calling pop or... Again, Moore lets George get away with that right hand lead when he misses. When George misses, he has to counter.
But Moore so far prefers throwing the right hand to the left. He finally did it, didn't he? Yep. Smashed the left against Foreman's jaw.
Now Michael is moving to his right the way I really think he should be moving. When he does that, I think things are easy for him.
Lands the jab with metronome consistency.
I think the myth of George's power has been exposed by Michael Moore so far.
The big night. 7 rounds in the books. Harold Letterman, how do you see it so far?
Jim, 6 rounds to 1, 69-64, a commanding 5-point lead for Michael Moore. I still say boxing judges are impressed with guys that got snapped, guys that could step forward, guys that throw harder shots, and guys that get off first. And Michael Moore is doing all those things. George Foreman just too much pouring, and he's just throwing those shots too slow.
All right, at the end of the last round, I thought Michael Moore had found the key. He was moving to his right, and he was really picking George apart. He comes out this round, and he goes right back to his left again. And again, you said Teddy Atlas is having a big night. He'll have a big night if he can make Michael Moore do what he wants him to do. Big right hand. That's the best right hand of the fight by George Foreman.
And Moore was hurt by that right hand, and he backs into a stationary position against the ropes.
And a right uppercut by George. George knows he hurt him.
And now Moore stops George in his tracks with a right. But here comes the big man again. Moore almost got into that parallel position against the ropes, which has given him trouble before, Gil.
That's one of a real no-no in boxing. I mean, that's one of the first things you learn. You never put your back flat against the ropes because you're a wide open target and you can't get any leverage on your own punches.
And when Michael backed up off that right hand by Foreman, he almost did it. Near trip by George. They keep going. Referee Joe Cortez having a very quiet night in there, and that's good. You think Moore has fully recovered from that right hand now, Gil?
Yes, he has.
The question is whether George is recovered, because he's now trying to take a break, it looks like.
Left and a right inside by Moore. Sizzling.
When Michael Moore moves to his right, he has it all his own way. One thing you have to give George credit for, though, is credit and will to win.
The early right hand by Foreman seemed to serve eventually as a wake-up call for Moore, who has come on to have a very strong last 2 minutes in this round.
Come on, we got it. Come on.
Uppercut by Moore blasted Foreman's chin backward. And George makes it out of the round that bedeviled him in Zaire 20 years ago.
I used to worry about his health, Gil. I'd stop worrying. Maybe I shouldn't.
Well, George has got such a strong mind, Larry. You know, a lot of fighters get knocked out because they lose their will to win. But George has got that great competitive spirit. Doesn't get discouraged, and believe me, he's getting hit with some hard punches because Michael Moore's right hand is his most effective punch, and he's nailed George with some good solid shots.
30 knockouts in 35 fights for Moore. He is not short on power at all.
Let him out, please, let him out. Come on, let's go.
And referee Joe Cortez is really doing a good job. He's right on top of the action when he has to be, and he disappears when he should.
I think he's terrific. Slow motion right that sailed over Moore's head by Foreman.
Well, George just did what he should do. He should aim that right hand right at Moore's chest. At least he'll hit something, and sometimes Moore can duck into a punch like that. But you don't, when it's going over his head, you tell your fighter, start aiming it at his chest. Especially with George's bulk. He'll move him back if he hits him on the chest.
Moore stepping inside and going to the body himself. Foreman throwing fewer and fewer punches now, it seems, as rounds 8 and 9 have progressed.
But again, Moore is not using too much movement again. But anytime he makes any movement at all, it makes him so much more effective. There he is again, just like a little slide to the right and snap the jab. It's when he stands in front of George and tries to fence with George that he's fighting George's fight.
And there's not much point in feinting with George because George reacts so slowly, you don't get much benefit from the feint, right? Foreman delivered a right hand up the middle, lancing blow there. Moore is still snapping George's head back from time to time with the jab. Win or lose, George is going to have a left eye swollen shut tonight. Rare left hand shot by Moore. Right hand landed for Foreman. Crowd relatively quiet as round 9 comes to a close. It's scheduled for 12.
To use Teddy Atlas's metaphor, Moore kept the ante.
5 punches. His activity level dropping now.
Wipe the water.
Earlier in the fight, he was routinely throwing between 50 and 60 punches in each round.
Again, George's best punch is still that left jab. That's the one punch he's been able to score with. They just scored with it again. He can still snap a left jab out, but not do much else.
Moore with a heavy shot on the hip from Foreman, and as he took that blow below the belt, Joe Cortez walked casually past Foreman and said, George, don't do that. Right hand landed there, and another. And a right and a left, and suddenly Moore stops punching, and it's Foreman's initiative.
And there's that competitive spirit of George is coming out again. He feels he's nailed Moore with a good punch, and he's a good finisher. He knows how to do it, but he's in with a tough guy.
And remember, Atlas told Moore George is going to try to find a moment here to steal the crowd and get them psyched up. That looked like it might have been it for a while, but now George stopped punching again. And takes jabs for his trouble. Foreman wading in to set up a left hook, and another left hook. And another left hook shot that missed.
George is so tired, though, Jim. If he misses a punch, he goes completely off balance. I have to give him all the credit in the world, but again, he's a 45-year-old man in a young man's game. But look at that competitive spirit coming out now.
Straight right hand landing for Foreman. He's had a pretty good round here in number 10.
Again, Atlas didn't counter. Atlas, here we go again with the Atlas. Michael Moore is down.
Down goes Moore on a right hand. An unbelievably close-in right hand shot. 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It happened. It happened.
I can't believe it. I can't believe it. Here's a guy I said was a clubber.
As referee Joe Cortez waved his arms over Moore, George Foreman knelt in prayer in the neutral corner.
You know, this was a 2-to-1 fight, but in my mind it was a gazillion to 1 that George Foreman could ever win the heavyweight championship again. This is a really remarkable achievement, and it has to stand on its own. We're in a show and tell medium, and show does it all.
So some of the old power was still there after all.
It sure fooled me. Didn't show it in the entire fight where it came from.
Well, we mentioned that he was having a strong round. He had set up some blows, and then that right hand anesthetized Michael Moore.
It sure did. And that's the one thing I said George couldn't do. He couldn't get you out with one punch. But boy, he sure fooled me and Michael Moore.
It landed right on the point of the chin, Gil.
Right on the button where it says good night.